everybody and welcome back to the channel, and if you're here for the very first time, welcome! I'm Jane and my husband Mike does everything behind the camera. We're British, early retirees, we've got no debt, we've paid off the mortgage and we live a thrifty, frugal and money-saving life here in Brittany in northwest France. And every Sunday we bring to you an aspect of our private lives. I know a lot of you watch because of the thrifty aspect of our lives, and a lot of you watch because of the living in France aspect of our lives. And today we're going to share something with you because when you're watching this, we'll have returned from the UK. And what we're going to share with you are the things that we don't miss about the UK at all. Before British people start clutching at your pearls and feeling offended, I'll bet you don't like these things either. Before I get into this, for context, I spent time in Plymouth, which is a very, very small city in the southwest of the UK, in Devon, and then I spent time various locations in Cornwall. So that's the first thing to share with you. So I'm not talking about all of the UK because some of it might be absolute nirvana. I just didn't go there. But my number one thing that I absolutely do not miss about the UK at all is the absolutely disgusting state of parking. Parking your car. It is an absolute blasted nightmare. You go visit people, there's nowhere to park. You have to be able to parallel park like a stunt driver on a very busy street with two ways of cars, being able to maneuver your car in one swift movement into a parking space whilst dealing with road rage of people coming in every other directions who are literally stopping their car, getting out of the car and shouting at you, usually things about wanting to rip your throat out and feed your entrails to the dog in the car, you know, that kind of thing. But anyway, it's about parking. Parking in the UK, where I went, is a nightmare. You visit people in their houses, there's nowhere to park. People's houses have no parking, maybe for one car, and they've got to be parking demons to get into it. You go visit people maybe in anywhere, whether it's a hospital or anywhere, there is no parking. You go to a supermarket, there's no parking. So you know, in car parks, there's kind of rows of places where you park the car. There isn't enough room between the two rows of cars to just pull up and swing your car in. You've got to be able to go shunt to get in and out of those parking spaces. If you're really, really, really lucky, you will find one of those magical parking spaces where you can go in one and come out the other. Let me know, people in the UK, maybe it's nirvana where you live, but in Plymouth, in the supermarkets, there's nowhere to park. Asda, Tesco, Sainsbury's, you've got rid of your parking spaces, haven't you? You've sold them off to electrical charging parking, money-making things. There's less parking everywhere you go. There's no on-street parking. There's nowhere to parking. I absolutely do not miss the absolute song and dance in the UK about just being able or not able to park a car. Oh my goodness me, my heart rate is racing. It's like revisiting trauma. Let's go on to the next one. Lots of these have got something to do with cars. It's traffic jams, terrible roads, not enough roads, too many cars. It's an absolute nightmare. I spent 4 days looking at the back of every single car, hardly able to move. You move 200 metres, stopping at traffic lights, round a roundabout, traffic lights on the roundabout, just too much traffic. This really makes me laugh about the UK. I have never seen as many fancy cars there. I don't see fancy cars here. People have utility cars, Dacias, Renaults. UK is full of really fancy, really expensive cars going very slowly, nowhere in traffic jams. Terrible roads, appalling lack of infrastructure and investment in roads and development in the UK, and yet more and more and more cars crawling along, going nowhere, very, very slowly. An example, I went from, one major area to another major area, through towns and villages all the way. Traffic jams non-stop. I'm not talking rush hour. I'm not talking the busy parts of the day. I was talking about any time of day. Any time of day. So things I absolutely do not miss. And, I don't live in Paris. I don't live in Lyon. I don't live in Bordeaux. And yes, those places will have traffic jams. They're big, major cities. But I don't have to queue to get in and out of a supermarket because there's a traffic jam. I don't have to queue around a roundabout because there's a traffic jam here. And I don't have to queue to go into very minor wee towns because there's a traffic jam. In fact, in 5 years, I've never been in a traffic jam in France. Never been in a traffic jam. The UK, I spent 4 days in a traffic jam. Don't miss that at all. The next one, and I didn't like this when I lived there, and I know some of you who live there, you probably won't like this either, and maybe some of you who live in major cities where everything's really close together, you won't like this either. But the thing I really do not miss about the UK is how absolutely crowded some places can be. So, you want to go somewhere nice on a sunny day, go out for the day with the family. It will be standing room only. You spend all of your time walking down a street or walking down a pavement saying, excuse me, pardon me, I do beg your pardon, I'm very sorry, pardon me, I'm so sorry, stepping aside. There's less crowded prisons. It really feels oppressive and stressful how crowded some places can be. Like I said, you might live in the part of the UK that's nirvana. You might live in I don't know where you live, but where I went, the places were really, really, really crowded. And it was just so unpleasant. It's like you can't get a break from people. That's hard. So houses are really close together. It's really crowded. If people are talking next door, you can hear it. If they've got the radio on, you can hear it. They start their car, you can hear it. Everything is so very, very, very crowded, and I don't miss that. And I get it. I live in other than Russia. I nearly said USSR, but it hasn't been called that in hundreds of years. Anyway, I'm old. But other than Russia, here in Europe, France is the largest country, and it has the same population as the UK, which is a tiny island. And I get that. There's lots of things about the UK that are just beautiful and wonderful and gorgeous and just delightful, but the crowdedness of it, I don't miss that. The next thing I really don't miss about the UK that I really wouldn't have noticed had I not spent 5 years in France is how loud British people are. How loud they are when they speak is what I mean. And it does sometimes feel like everybody is shouting. I'm just going to explain something to you before I go into this. If I go into a supermarket in France, they are quiet. People are speaking quietly or not speaking at all. It's a very quiet place. If you go into a restaurant in France, which I don't do very often, admittedly, but if you do, you won't hear people on the next table. They really, really keep their voices as low as they can. So if a restaurant is crowded in France, you get like a gentle murmur. But it hit me when I went to the UK for reasons that I don't need to explain to you or tell you why, is when I was in the UK, I did have to go into a restaurant or somewhere to eat every single day. And it just hit me how loud people's voices are, to the point it was an absolute cacophony. Because if that table's loud, then the people on this table have to be louder, and they have to be louder. So as you go in, it's like a wall of sound. And when you go into the supermarket, people don't keep their voices down and quiet and to themselves. and their voices are extremely loud. And I would never have noticed that had I not spent 5 years living here. And when you go back, you really do notice that people's voices are very, very loud. The last one I'm going to share with you about things that I don't miss from the UK that I, again, really wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't have moved to France. It would just have been okay. I wouldn't have noticed this, but I do notice this. Because not only was I having to be in restaurants for 4 days, I actually had to be in supermarkets for one reason or another for 4 days in a row. And I went to different supermarkets. I went to Morrison's, I went to Tesco's, and I went to Asda. And this is what I noticed about food, because I just wasn't really looking at other things but the food. And this is something that I really don't miss. And it's a comparison with France and comparing it with the UK. I really don't miss the lack of choice. Here in France, we have massive choice. You go for tomatoes, there's 7 or 8 different types of tomatoes. You go to get lettuce, again, 7 or 8 different types of lettuce, different types of potatoes, there's different types of fish, there's so many different types of yogurts. There will be a dozen different types of Greek natural yogurt, different types of fromage frais, the different types of sort of, which is like another type of yogurt. There's different type, it's just so much choice here. There are so many different cuts of beef. There are so many different types of fish. I've got oodles of choice of shellfish. And in the UK, it just felt really limited. There was looking around, at one stage, I needed to be with someone who needed to buy cleaning products. And in the supermarket I went to, which was Tesco's, they didn't have any cheaper brands. They had all the expensive branded brands, but they didn't have hardly any at all of the Tesco's own brand, and none of the bargain stuff that I'm used to seeing. So maybe people buy that maybe in Lidl or Aldi, but it just wasn't there in Tesco's. In Asda, a massive Asda superstore, so little choice in fruit and vegetables. Very few different types of apples. There was either red grapes or green. There was different types of grapes. So that's something that, as I said, I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been living in France for 5 years. I couldn't go back to that. I don't miss that. I really wouldn't have noticed it before, but I notice it now, and I really don't miss the lack of choice. Well, I'm sure people who live in the UK don't like the parking situation and the crowded roads and how crowded places can be and how noisy things can be, and maybe have noticed that they don't have as much supermarket choice as they would possibly like. It was a bit light today, it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, and it's just my personal opinion. And like I said, had I not lived in another country for 5 years, I wouldn't even have noticed these things, would I? Anyway, there you go. 5 things that we really don't miss from the UK. We hope you enjoyed that video. We'll see you again soon. Bye for now.